Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for December 6th, 2023. And the question I want to look at today is, whatever happened to human rights? The idea that there should not be violence perpetrated against your fellow man. Are the cries of children dying in Gaza not being heard in the corridors of power in Washington and in Western capitals? It appears not. There are voices being raised, but no action is being taken to stop the slaughter underway in Gaza. The idea that this is somehow justified by the atrocities committed by Hamas in their attacks on October 7th just doesn't hold up to rational investigation, and certainly not to the human suffering that's being inflicted deliberately, supposedly to get vengeance and revenge for the attack of October 7th. So I want to have you hear some of the voices that are being raised and to make sure that these are not cries in the wilderness. Let's start with Jan Egeland, who's the Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council. He said, quote, "We've been forced to halt nearly all of our aid operations due to the bombardment, the chaos, and the panic. The pulverizing of Gaza now ranks among the worst assaults on any civilian population in our time and age." He went on to say, "Today, more than 750,000 people are crowded into just 133 shelters. Tens of thousands live on the streets of southern Gaza, where, under bombardment, they are forced to improvise basic shelters from whatever they can get hold of. The winter rains have arrived, and so have infectious diseases, just as public health services have been utterly paralyzed. Many of my own NRC staff members now live on the streets." He went on to say, "There must be accountability for those responsible for the killings, the torture, and the atrocities committed in Israel on October 7th. But the killing of thousands of innocent children and women, the siege on an entire civilian population behind closed borders in Gaza are also crimes under international law. The military campaign can in no way be described as self-defense. The situation in Gaza is a total failure of our shared humanity." That from Jan Egeland of the Norwegian Refugee Council. Then we have James Elder, the spokesman of the United Nations Children's Fund, who said that the Israeli approach to creating these zones, that is driving the population into southern Gaza, he said, quote, "This is calculated, it's cold, and it speaks to the lack of any sense of decency that has been enacted on relentless attacks on moms and kids and families." He said this is the perfect storm for disease outbreak. And he said, "Remember, Israel is the occupying power. It's there. You have to provide food, water, medicines." Now, given what we're talking about, that we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who are moving somewhere with bombardments at a scale 200 a day, the only possible way to create safe spaces in Gaza that are truly safe, that protect human life, is for the hell to stop raining down from the sky. Only a ceasefire is going to save the children of Gaza right now. And he repeated that. Only a ceasefire is going to save the children of Gaza now. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres yesterday said that civilians, including health workers, journalists, and UN personnel, and civilian infrastructure must be protected at all times. He said there's no safe place to go in Gaza. And then you have the statement from Martin Griffiths, the UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs. And he said, quote, "Every time we think things cannot get more apocalyptic in Gaza, they do. People are being ordered to move again with little to survive on, forced to make one impossible choice after another. Nowhere is safe in Gaza," Griffiths said. "Not hospitals, not shelters, not refugee camps. No one is safe. not children, not health workers, not humanitarians. Such blatant disregard for basic humanity must stop. The fighting must stop, unquote. Now, there are some who refer to the situation for the Palestinians as living in an equivalent of an apartheid state, referring to the conditions that existed in South Africa for many years before the overthrow of the apartheid regime. Now, for some who say that's an exaggeration, it's an overstatement, let's hear from people who are actually experts on what it meant to fight apartheid, namely representatives of the South African government. Here we have a statement from the Foreign Ministry, which says, quote, the statements from Israeli leaders, referring to the statements saying that they're going to wipe out Hamas, these statements appear impervious to the global calls for an immediate end to the killing of Palestinian civilians. South Africa calls for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and the resumption of talks that will end the violence arising from the continued illegal occupation and lay the basis for a just and lasting solution. Then the foreign minister of South Africa, Naledi Pandor, was interviewed on CNN, and here's what she said. What's underway in Palestine today is, quote, to a great degree far worse than what we experienced under apartheid. It is horrific, and it is occurring while the whole world is watching, seemingly paralyzed as a slaughter is underway. Not even a peace-securing force has been provided to protect the Palestinians. This lack is extremely shocking in comparison. What she said was the international support which aided the fight for freedom from apartheid in South Africa. Now, as you hear these voices, listen to what the Israeli Defense Forces spokesman had to say about their attacks so far, where they've reported that for every Hamas leader killed, only 2 civilians have died. The Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, who's a spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces, said that given that it is urban terrain where the fighting is taking place, that ratio is tremendous, tremendously positive, unquote. Only 2 civilians dying per Hamas member, that's acceptable? Well, apparently it is. Remember, officials of the Israeli government have said that the Palestinians are not humans, they're animals, they're barbarians. Now, to justify these operations, the Israeli officials are releasing what they say is evidence of the barbaric nature of the October 7th attack. And the intent of this is to show that the IDF killing of civilians is a legitimate response to the atrocities of Hamas. Remember, Netanyahu initially called this Operation Vengeance. Well, it is not a legitimate response. And I will quote again from Ami Ayalon, the former head of the Shin Bet, the Israeli internal security, who said, quote, the military will never give us security. It can defend us, which parenthetically, by the way, it did not do on October 7th, but it cannot secure us. Only negotiations for a 2-state solution can provide security because it's necessary to, quote, give hope to the Palestinians, unquote. And he said this in an interview with the French website. Is this being heard in Israel? I don't think so. Is it being heard in Washington? Are any of these voices calling for a humane response being heard in the corridors of power? I urge you to join us in making sure that not only are these voices heard, but that action is taken to stop the killing going on in Gaza right now. There's no justification for this, especially because it's been proven over and over and over that such terror imposed on people only leads to more terror unless you wipe out all of the people. Is that the intent? It may be if you listen to people like Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security advisor to Netanyahu. So join us in making sure that these voices are not only heard, but there's action taken to back it up. Thanks for joining me today. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and weekly magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.